Live from Wisconsin this morning, post-National GOP convention is Oakland County State Senator and Delegate Jim Runstad. He's on OTR this week with what happened. Our lead story, the assassination attempt on the former president, and what is Joe Biden going to do, the Michigan impact. Around the OTR table, Chad Livengood, Lauren Gibbons, and Ben Solis. Sitting with us as we get the inside out, off the record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Martin Waymeyer, a full-service strategic communications agency, partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and public policy engagement. Learn more at martinwaymeyer.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Thank you very much. Welcome back to Studio C on an incredibly busy news week. And when we put this show to bed last week on Friday, we did not know what was going to happen on Saturday. And here's the impact in Michigan when it did.
Newly elected Macomb County Republican U.S. Representative John James and an official from Detroit, Dr. Ben Carson, a former member of the Trump administration, alleged this. Now they have tried to kill him, which suggests an alleged plot to murder the former president. It was just that kind of speculation that President Biden warned against as he launched an FBI probe into what did happen.
The FBI is leading this investigation, which is still in its early stages. We don't yet have any information about the motive of the shooter. We know who he is. I urge everyone, please, don't make assumptions about his motives or his affiliations. Let the FBI do their job and their partner agencies do their job. I'm instructed that this investigation be thorough and swift.
Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer offered something more mainstream, quote, "This is not how we solve our differences," and she said she was horrified to hear of this news. The state Republican Party chair Pete Hoekstra called for prayers for the former president and the country. His Democratic counterpart, Chairwoman Lavora Barnes, condemned the act in Pennsylvania, quote, "in the strongest terms." Meanwhile, another Michigan Republican Congresswoman, Lisa McClain, blamed the shooting on, quote, 8 years of radical left demonstrations against Donald Trump. And in the U.S. Senate contest, the two frontrunners checked in. Democrat Alyssa Slotkin said basically she was hoping for the safety of the former president. And Republican Mike Rogers called it a somber moment for the nation, and he also called for prayers. Meanwhile, Democratic Genesee County Congressman Dan Kildee summed it up this way, quote, "Violence is never the answer."
So, Ben, you headed up the coverage of this story for the good folks at Gong. What did you do?
My best. This is a situation that is unprecedented. We haven't had a situation like this where a candidate, an American president, or any political figure has been the subject of an assassination attempt. It's heinous, but I think overall we can just look at it politically. It's just so unproductive. We have a bloody history in this country and maybe an innate drive to fight, but we've got to learn how to leave that behind if we're going to move forward.
Honestly, yeah, it was a horrifying situation, and I really feel for all the people who were attending this rally. We cover rallies all the time as journalists, especially in Michigan, where there are a lot of them. I was at the Biden rally the night before, and so I was really feeling for all of the people in attendance who, were just trying to see a presidential candidate speak. And obviously, as Ben said, it is not productive, and it's truly just horrible to think that this is where we're at in politics and society.
Tim, the first presidential campaign rally I ever went to was 14 years old. It was 1996, and Bob Dole gave a rally outside in downtown Chelsea, my hometown. They shut down M52, which anyone knows driven through there knows that is the main road through town, through Main Street. So Dole could have a campaign rally outside. And one of my lasting memories was seeing snipers on every rooftop, police snipers on the rooftop of Jiffy Mix and all of the and the Common Grill building and whatnot, and so what is just astonishing is the idea that someone can get within 160 feet of a president or presidential candidate or any politician speaking at an outdoor event like that and take a shot. And I think we still don't know all the facts, but a lot of things have emerged this week about witnesses and whatnot, but there's going to be a lot of of real major inspection here. I know Congress is going to start having hearings as soon as Monday with the Secret Service director, and there's going to be some serious evaluation about how politicians move around. We've already seen a lot more heightened security with just our own governor after the the plot to kidnap her, and so I think we're going to see a more and more change of how these events are handled.
Well, when the president said in that piece, don't make assumptions, that was wishful thinking. In this current climate, Ben, that's the game.
It may have been. What we do know is that it was a massive security failure. But of course, everyone wants to fill in the blanks. And, in this environment that we have now, as Lauren touched on, as Chad touched on, it's easy for people to try and find some kind of explanation there. Pete Hoekstra called for cooling of temps, but we, didn't really see that from a lot of surrogates. Immediately there was this rush to judgment that this was the left that attacked, Donald Trump, and let the people do their work.
Well, and you saw in the Republican National Convention this week the messaging. They tried to impeach him, then they tried to jail him, and then they tried to kill him. I mean, you're going to hear this over and over and over, and and the Republicans are using this to rally their base, to strengthen their coalition at a time when the Democratic Party is in somewhat of a free fall right now with their candidate.
Well, in particular, the R's want the D's to back off this concept that Donald Trump is trying to destroy the democracy. In fact, he said last night, I am restoring and saving the democracy.
Yeah, if anything, the political temperature has risen significantly despite all of these calls to come together and condemn political violence. And certainly, yes, that has been a sticking point, and Democrats have really been pushing hard on that, citing the 2020 election and the fallout, especially from Trump, claiming fraud happened. And so that has been something that Democrats have really tried to resurrect and say, this is what happened last time, it could happen again. And certainly Republicans are trying to forge ahead.
It is pretty clear that the orchestration at that convention, I was not there, obviously, and we'll talk to our guest about it, I'm sure, but to present a different Donald Trump.
It was. I mean, and they did do a good job at that.
The granddaughter probably did the best.
The granddaughter was pretty sweet, and always good helps to have granddaughters, and also just other family members and people. Now Hulk Hogan, that was a little different, to say the least. The Trumpomaniacs, is that what they call it?
Trump mania.
Trump mania, yeah. But yes, and also like Trump himself, like his speech Thursday night started out with this sort of retelling his own story, a harrowing story of surviving assassin's bullet by a centimeter, basically.
By the turn of a head.
By a turn of a head, and just in this chart. I looked over this beautiful chart, he kept saying, and I think we're going to see this chart. He's going to be showing this chart off for the rest of his life, probably, because it may have saved his life by looking at it. But he started that way. Then, of course, Trump could not help himself. He turned into campaign stump speech and started throwing all the red meat. And I mean, at one point, I messaged Craig Mauger, who was there in Milwaukee. I said, "Is this attack on Sean Fain, the UAW president? Is this in the speech?" He's like, "No, it's not in the speech." And so
which is vintage Donald Trump.
It was vintage Donald Trump. They did all of this choreography to show him as this hero, as this national hero. And then, of course, he did what he does, and he went down into sort of a darker place, and further into his 93-minute speech.
I would argue, though, that it might have been red meat, but it was leaner red meat. It was not as vociferous as he could have been. We have seen Trump go much harder in these situations. Could it be that this assassination attempt cooled him back a little bit? Was it necessary to present a much more steady Trump in that? To a degree, yeah, but of course he couldn't help himself.
The Biden story obviously is going to be a biggie as everybody moves into this weekend. Will he or won't he? What's going on there, Lauren, in Michigan?
I mean, certainly it's the question on every Democrat's mind, I think. Like, will they be, will Biden be the nominee, or will someone else come in to take the place? And it is looking increasingly likely that, someone else may step in. I was at the Biden rally last weekend on Friday in Detroit, and, he actually, he was pretty fiery. He was really stating, I'm the nominee. Democrats elected me through the primary. He was really adamant that he was going to stay in the race, but he has gotten so much pressure from very high up Democrats at this point that maybe it's time to step back and let someone else take it on. What the implications are, we don't really know yet. It's a huge deal. It's a historic thing that he's even considering this outcome and to step aside.
To bail out this late is really unprecedented in modern history. And then on top of that, I mean, at the end of the day, this is all about power. Joe Biden wants to stay in power. Democrats in Congress want to stay in power. And they start looking at the polls. They start looking at reality that they probably could have had this conversation a year ago, this debate a year ago, but nobody would step up. Nobody would cross the president. And all these allies would, in Congress, some of them also quite old themselves, would not have this dialogue with him or even entertain the debate. And so, you can kind of step back and say, boy, this was kind of predictable that this would eventually happen, where they would have to come to terms with this, with whether he is able to continue doing this job. And it really has, sort of the proverbial chickens have come home to roost now.
Well, the governor continues on her book tour. By the way, number 3 on the New York Times list. That's not bad. That's not bad for a governor. But she basically told one group on the speculation issue, what about Vice President Ms. Whitmer? And she said, I would never say never, which certainly opens that door.
It does, and her name has been kind of bandied about at the national level, whether or not she wants that or accepts it, or if she's even asked. There's a lot of other names out there as well. That all remains to be seen. I think a lot is up in the air, but certainly, her book came out at the right time.
If we just want to game this out a little for a second, if Biden were to step down and he were to say, I want to throw my support behind Vice President Kamala Harris to be the nominee, Harris could pick her own vice president, but or they could have a floor fight at the national convention over who is the vice president. Remember, in the past, way past, presidents didn't always get to pick their vice president. They got saddled essentially by the party machine. I mean, Roosevelt did not pick Truman. Truman just got shoved on him by the Democratic machine, and so in the 1944 convention. So you could have a scenario like that where people go to the convention and there's a brokered deal or multiple balloting over who is the running mate. That's presuming that they accept Harris out of the gate and she wins the nomination at a convention. So this could get really interesting. Again, we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves because we don't have a president who's stepping down.
See how close we came. All right, let's go out to Wisconsin. And let's say good morning to State Senator from Oakland County, Jim Runstad. Senator, welcome back to Off the Record. Nice to see you, sir. What time did you get to bed last night?
Well, we got out of there very late. Donald Trump went with, I guess, a record-long speech. And then there was balloons, thousands of balloons. I've never seen so many balloons in my life. And then there was this sea of balloons you had to get through to get to the exits. And then there's people, that you're worried about whether they can get past the balloon or slip on the balloons. So they were popping the balloons. And so it took a long time to get out. Then Madison is an hour and 25 minutes from Milwaukee. So it was a late night getting home, but wanted to get up for the show here. So I'm up and ready for it.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. So you listened to the speech last night. Was there any point in the middle of that speech that you said to yourself, this guy is just over-promising way too much in a quick effort to get everything done? Did you think that at all?
Well, I would say I would have normally thought that because my experience since I started paying attention to politics, which has been maybe since I was 15, was I would watch these presidential candidates run and just blow smoke relentlessly. In the primary, they would be running to the left or the right, and as soon as that was over, they get in the general election, then they're moving to the middle and jettisoning all their promises. Then they would get elected, and they jettisoned all those promises. And so I was very used to presidents lying through their teeth. And Donald Trump's the first person I ever remember who said, well, no, I promised this and this and this. None of us thought he was actually going to do any of this stuff. He's the first one that said, no, I promised them, and I'm going to try to get these things done. So will he behave that same way? I think he will. He'll try to get these things done.
Senator, I want to ask you, in your district, the GM plant in Orion Township, or maybe I'm not sure if that's your district, but apologies, in Oakland County, that plant is going to be building all-electric Chevy Silverado trucks. Do you see the U.S. in direct competition with the Chinese on building EVs, given what Donald Trump talked about last night about Chinese manufacturers building assembly plants just over the border in Mexico right now for EVs?
I don't know how anyone could not reach that conclusion. The Chinese are building better cars at reduced costs more than ever before. They have contracts with countries all over the world to get chromium and nickel and all of the materials you need for batteries. We have to buy all the stuff from them. So I think they will be highly, highly competitive. And everything I've heard is, yeah, they do want to start building in Mexico and start exporting cars to the U.S. So I fully expect all that's going to happen. And I think that's part of the reason why Donald Trump said that the head of the UAW needs to go is that with the EVs, it's a fraction of the number of auto workers. So if we're taking in Chinese cars over the Mexican border and then we're transitioning to EVs, it is going to eviscerate the number of employees that are going to be employed in the auto industry here in Michigan.
But what does Shawn Fain, the UAW president, have to do with the way the Chinese are bringing in cheaper cars because their workers aren't paid nearly as much as what a UAW worker makes?
As I just said, that the plan of the Chinese is to import very cheap Chinese cars. And Donald Trump is the one who really is making this issue, as he did last night. He is making an issue. We're going to put a tariff on this. We're not going to let them just flood the nation with these cheaper cars. And I didn't hear any of that out of Biden, but the head of the UAW is 100% behind Biden anyway. So the point Donald Trump was making is I am really trying to protect these jobs of these auto workers in Michigan, and the president is not, and the head of the UAW is supporting Biden anyway.
As we have just been discussing, voters are dealing with a lot of heavy issues right now, both with the attempted assassination and the possibility of a new Democratic candidate. What was the mood of Republicans who were attending the convention as all of this news was coming out?
Yeah, there's a real sense of absolute excitement going on in the Republican Party like I haven't seen in years. And the Republicans can see the Democrats are in absolute meltdown. The Democrats were not wanting to deal with the fact you hear all these comments on every gaffe that he was making that were like just historically terrible gaffes where he doesn't seem to even know who people are. And they're covering for him. And now it's all coming to a head. And we've been talking about this for months and months and months, but it's just not been getting the kind of coverage it should. Now, after the debate, they're seeing the problem. They're going to have to have some real tough choices on our side of the aisle. I've never seen more unity, more excitement than ever. I couldn't believe that Nikki Haley came in, such a strong critic of Donald Trump. Many of the other past competitors of Donald Trump coming together within our caucus. There's Nikki Haley supporters. There's DeSantis supporters. Every single person was absolutely 100% united, and you don't see that often anymore in the Republican Party. This is a unique moment.
Senator, GOP leaders and Trump campaign officials have called for cooling of rhetoric, mainly towards Donald Trump, but you still see a lot of Republican surrogates on the attack towards Democrats, saying that they'll quite literally destroy democracy if they win. How can you expect that of your opponents when some people in the GOP choose not to do the same?
You're going to have some people who are disordered or knuckleheads, and every faction, it doesn't matter what political party you're talking about, that's always going to happen. And so these outliers picking and choosing one thing that one person said who's, some low-level, activist, is not the same as what the president is saying, or very high people in positions of power. And I think that if people like Donald Trump said that if Biden got reelected, our democracy's gone, people are going to be thrown in concentration camps, he's a fascist, he's Hitler, I would say that's outrageous. But I don't hear that from the Democrats, because that's precisely what they're saying about Donald Trump. I believe that's unacceptable, to make these ridiculous, monstrous lies that a guy who was the president for 4 years is suddenly going to order, if he could ever even get people to start throwing people in concentration camps by the millions and become Hitler and fascist. None of this, people watched this last night, know that's all BS. And yet this has been the thing that the president has been saying. There's levels of unacceptability that and decorum that I think scaring the people, that if my opponent is elected, they're going to kick you in the doors with Gestapo and take you off to a concentration camp. I think that's off the pale, and I haven't heard a comment like that, unless one of you can cite it, that Donald Trump has said about President Biden.
Not necessarily Donald Trump himself, but that was a common theme throughout the convention from top surrogates who spoke at the convention. You didn't hear that during your time there?
Name one who said that Biden is a fascist. He's going to throw people in concentration camps. No, I didn't hear one person up there speak. If you could cite one, I was there. I didn't hear one person say something like that.
Senator, the Republican Party just adopted a platform that calls for a mass deportation of illegal immigrants. And Donald Trump has talked about this in broad terms and not ruled out the idea of having some kind of detention system, essentially camps of some sort to pull together as many as 11 million people who are in the country, entered the country illegally. What would this look like in your mind to try to deport this many people? Wouldn't it have to involve some type of detention center type system?
Well, number one, if you're conflating somebody who broke into the country illegal, who may be a cartel member and a child trafficker being detained, along with political opponents who are citizens, there's a little bit of difference there. But number two, after World War II, we had hundreds of thousands of people come in across the border illegally to work in the factories because we had so many soldiers gone. After World War II, they had to go through a deportation to get them out. The citizens' rights were not violated, getting rid of these people here illegally. And yes, we have now maybe 10 million people. It's a catastrophe. They're getting benefits on the backs of the taxpayer. As Donald Trump talked about yesterday, people can't rent homes, but we have 10 to 15 million new people looking for homes. So people who are young can't start a family because we've got to house millions and millions of people that shouldn't even be in this country. So I think the vast majority of people, if you look at the polls, they agree we shouldn't be supporting all of these people from 180 countries unvetted pouring into the country. We need to deport them.
Senator, something more mundane. On the state budget, as you watched the Democrats and this governor pass this budget, what were you thinking?
I was thinking it was absolutely outrageous. $83 billion that have all of our taxpayers, not federal dollars, in the dead of night, and I've seen Republicans and Democrats do that. I've been disgusted with it all the way through. Over $400 million in pet projects. We're already starting to unearth this. It's a complete corrupt system. I have been working with Republicans and Democrats for the last month trying to change the rules coming up when they get elected. Things like 72 hours to read the bill. How is it we get hours before reading an $82 billion bill of the most complex 2,000 pages you can imagine? The pet projects, we won't find out until months to who's got the pet projects. Why aren't those listed in the budget? That's another reform that I've been working to try to get done. I still believe, and I've said it before, I believe Michigan is the least transparent and perhaps the most corrupt state in the nation. I've been talking to delegates here, and I tell them from other states how Michigan operates. You have no bid contracts to companies in exchange for campaign cash. They said Michigan's like a banana republic. Oh yeah, it's probably the worst. I've talked to all these states and said, what? You could give a no bid contract to a company with there's no purchasing, there's no guardrails. No, give them campaign cash and get all this money to your private company. No bid. Nobody else can get it. So I've been trying to work at getting this rotten edifice of Michigan's appropriation process corrected, but we'll see. It doesn't matter seeing who's in power. This process continues.
So both Republicans and Democrats are guilty of your word, corrupt action on the budget. Is that correct, sir?
100%. I've been here 9.5 years. I've been fighting this stuff. Let's get transparency in the appropriation. How in God's name are we having all of this corruption? And you guys are the media is still unearthing more and more. It seems like every week now the Democrats, their corruption's coming out. And before that, it was the Republicans. I don't see anything getting fixed. So the media's got to pound and pound this issue that we should not be allowing these dead of night deal cutting. Who is the good boys and the good girls that get these pet projects that have no applicability to what the people want. It's all in exchange for this rotten corruption.
Senator, thank you for doing our program. Have a safe trip back home, and we'll see you on the other side, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks to our panel. Good show. See you next week for more Off the Record on who knows what's going to happen next.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Martin Waymeyer, a full-service strategic communications agency, partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and public policy engagement. Learn more at martinwaymeyer.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan Public Television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.